This is the fourth Oxford Humans Forum on the issue of death. We have organized a variety of colloquiums on death-related issues in the past, but today it will be special. Not only the topic is special, which is beliefs and reality about reincarnation, or whether reincarnation is real or not, as it was advertised in the Korean section. But the speaker himself is very special. We have a world-renowned researcher on this issue with us today, Dr. James G. Matlock from the US. And I wish to say a big thanks to him first. And let me just briefly introduce Dr. Matlock before we start.
죽음과 관련하여 다양한 세미나를 개최한 바 있었는데요. 오늘은 조금 특별합니다. 오늘 다룰 주제는요. 환생에 대한 믿음과 현실, 환생은 과연 실제하는가입니다. 그리고 이 주제에 대하여 세계적인 명성을 지니신 환생 전문 연구가 미국의 제임스 G. 맷럭 교수님께서 금일 감사하게도 발표해 주실 예정입니다. 그럼 맷럭 교수님에 대해서 지 교수님께서 간략히 소개를 시켜드리겠습니다.
Dr. Matlock received a BA in English, not reincarnation, from Emory University in 1977, and he got a PhD in anthropology from the University of Southern Illinois at Carbondale in 2002. And he has worked at the American Society for Psychical Research in New York and at the Rhine Research Center in Durham, North Carolina. He is now a research fellow at the Parapsychology Foundation. As I said before, his chief interest is in reincarnation, which is reflected very clearly in the titles of the books he has written so far. He has written two books on the subject. One is entitled, quote, I saw a light and came here, Children's Experiences of Reincarnation, which was co-authored with Dr. L. Lander Haraldson in 2017. And there's another book, more recently, it is entitled Signs of Reincarnation, Exploring Beliefs, Cases, and Theory, which was published in 2019. And in this second book, Dr. Matlock deepens his argument and presents a more structured understanding of the phenomena, a step further from the discoveries he made in the first book. Yeah, please, go ahead.
네, 멜럭 교수님은 1977년 에머리 대학교에서 영문학 학사로 졸업하시고 2002년도에는 칼번데일의 University of Southern Illinois에서 인류학 박사학위를 취득하셨습니다. 교수님의 경력으로는 뉴욕시에 소재하는 아메리칸 소사이티의 초자연적 연구소와 노스캐롤라이나주의 더햄시의 라인 연구소에서 연구원으로 재직하신 바 있고 현재는 초심리학 재단인 Parapsychology Foundation에서 연구원으로 지내고 계십니다. 앞서 말씀드린 바와 같이 멜록 교수님의 주된 연구 소재는 환생이고 환생에 대해서는 현재까지 총 2권의 책을 집필하셨습니다. 첫 번째 책은 2017년도에 엘렌더 해리슨 교수님과 공동 집필한 I Saw a Light and Came Here, Children's Experience of Reincarnation이라는 책이고요. 책 제목을 번역해보자면은 나는 빛을 보았고 여기에 왔더라. 환생에 대한 아이들의 경험. 그리고 두 번째 책은 2019년에 출간하신 책인데요. Signs of Reincarnation. 이 번역을 해보면은 환생에 대한 징후, 신념, 사례와 이론을 탐구하다 정도로 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다. 이 책에서는 첫 번째 책의 연구 결과들을 기반하여 환생에 대하여 보다 체계적인 이해와 논거를 제시하고 있습니다.
Yeah, I will not go any further than this about Dr. Matlock's personal bio, but if you have any burning questions, please ask him when we have a Q&A session at the end of this talk.
감사합니다.
Right, thank you. I think that's all for now as an introduction, and let's move on to the main body of today's session. Dr. Matlock, let me start our session with one general background question. What made you first drawn into this weird subject? And have there been any interesting features of your research or any episodes to mention?
What got me interested in this? Well, you know, as you mentioned, I was an English major. That means a literature major in college, in the university. And so I read a lot of fiction for that. And the reason that I majored in English was because my first choice of career was to be a writer, a creative writer. I wanted to write novels, short stories. But I found when I finished college that it was very difficult for me to make a living at doing that. So I had to find another subject, something else for a career. And I had become, at this point, I'd become interested in what we call paranormal, and I put that in quotes, things, subjects. And the subject of reincarnation was something I had never really thought about before very much, except that I had seen it come up again and again in the literature that I had been reading. And so I was intrigued by it, and that's how it started. I went to my library looking for a different subject to write about, and I found books on reincarnation.
네, 첫 번째 질문입니다. 환생에 대한 연구를 시작하시게 된 계기와 배경이 어떻게 되는지, 그리고 멜럭 교수님이 지난 연구 역사 동안 특별히 주안점을 두는 특징이 있는지, 그리고 또 흥미로운 에피소드가 있다면은 말씀 부탁드립니다라는 질문이었고요. 답변을 주시기를 일단 영문학 학사로 이제 학교를 다니셨기 때문에 기본적으로 소설책을 굉장히 많이 읽으셨고 작가를 제초의 꿈을 작가라는 꿈을 가지고 있었다고 합니다. 하지만 이제 커리어를 생각해봤을 때 작가로 이제 계속 먹고 살기가 쉽지 않은 걸 알다 보니까 초심리학에 대한 관심을 가지기 시작했다고 하고요. 당시 이제 영문학 학사 자격을 따기 위해서 읽었던 많은 책들에서 이제 환생에 대한 주제가 계속 눈에 띄면서 이 환생에 대한 연구를 시작하게 됐다고 합니다.
So, having gotten interested in reincarnation, then I began reading widely in it. And at first, you know, this was in the 1970s, I should say, and it was just the beginning of what we call in the United States a new age literature and thinking coming out. So I started with those books, but then I found the works of Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, and he approached the subject in a very different way, in an academic way, going out into the field and researching cases. Many of his cases he studied were in Asia, in India, Burma, Sri Lanka, countries like this. He did not, unfortunately, study any cases in Korea, so we don't have any cases from Korea. But I quickly got into this type of study.
네, 당시에 이제 뉴에이지 그룹을 비해서 다양한 연구 단체에서 환생에 대한 연구를 시작했다고 하는데요. 특히 멜락 교수님께서 눈여겨보셨던 부분은 이제 버지니아 대학에서 이안 스티븐 교수님의 연구에 대한 내용이라고 합니다. 당시 이안 스티븐 교수님은 이제 어떤 현장에서 직접 이제 그 데이터를 수집해서 연구를 하시기로 유명을 했었는데 특히 서구권 지역보다는 인도, 버르마, 스리랑카 이런 지역에서 환생 연구에 대한 현장 연구를 직접 했었고 아쉽게도 한국 케이스는 없었다고 하지만은 그런 그 작업들이 굉장히 흥미도를 줬다고 합니다.
Yeah. So the next question then.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I suppose there are many numerous cases you have found interesting. Do you remember any one outstanding case which was particularly convincing to you, and why it is so convincing to you?
Well, there's so many cases. There are about 2,500, that many, 2,500 now that have been about 400 to 500 have been published. But there are that many cases that have been studied. And I've studied several myself. I think the most interesting one that I like to talk about is one that I wrote about in my last book, in Signs of Reincarnation. And it's the case of a young American girl who was from our state of Oklahoma, which, for those of you who don't know the geography of the United States, is sort of in the middle of the country. And it began when she was very young. So I'll pause and let the translation and let Young translate this, and then I'll proceed.
네. 지 교수님께서 가장 흥미로웠던 사례를 하나만 좀 집어달라고 여쭤보셨고요. 멜록 교수님께서 총 2,500여 건의 사례들이 있는데, 그 중에서 이제 본인께서 집필하신 마지막 책에서 다뤘던 그 미국 오클라호마 주에 있는 어린 소녀에 대한 사례에 대해서 말씀을 주시려고 합니다. 오클라호마 주가 이제 미국 중부 지역에 있는 주라고 이해를 하시면 되겠고요.
Yeah. Okay. So Rylan, when she was only about 1, very young, she would start doing very strange things. She would go into the bathroom. This is one of the first things. Would go into the bathroom, and there was a vanity, a chest of drawers there, with the mirror on top, for as you commonly find in bathrooms, at least in this country. So as she would pull out the drawers of the vanity, would look at the contents, would close the drawers, not take anything out, just very strange. And she would do this, I was told, as soon as she could stand. As soon as she was able to do it, she would begin doing this. Well, gradually then, other things began to happen that suggested that she was under some sort of stress. She would begin to sleepwalk. She couldn't sleep through the night. She would get up maybe 2 times during the night, even 3 times. Go and get in bed with her mother. When she fell asleep again, if they put her back in her bed, she would again wake and sleepwalking. So they would let her sleep in her bed for a while. And then when she got even older, and it was school age, she would start complaining about her clothes and wanting the tags cut out of her shirts.
네, 이 소녀의 이름은 라일린이라는 소녀에 대한 사례고요. 이제 1살 때부터 이제 막 걸음마를 떼기 시작할 때부터 화장실에 직접 가서 서랍을 열고 서랍 안에 내용물을 직접 본 다음에 다시 서랍을 닫는 이런 행위들을 자주 했다고 하고, 연구가들은 스트레스가 요인인지 모르겠지만은 몽유병을 많이 겪었다고 합니다. 그래서 재워놓은 뒤에도 이제 수시로 부모님 방까지 직접 걸어오고 다시 본인의 방에 들여다 주면 또 몽유병이 있어서 계속 걸어오는 그런 증상을 많이 겪었다고 하고요. 그리고 나이가 좀 점진적으로 계속 이제 증상들이 계속 발현이 되는데, 그 다음부터는 이제 본인이 입은 옷에 대해서 상당히 불쾌감을 드러냈다고 합니다. 어린 나이에도 불구하고.
Well, this was the first part of this was going on before she was able to talk, and so before she was saying anything. In fact, she was talking before she began to say anything in relation to the previous life. In fact, it was not until she was 3 that she said the first things. She told her mother that she thought that she had died. And at that point, she thought she had died in her yard when she had struck by lightning, it seemed that she was in her yard.
그래서 이제 뭐 옷이 마음에 안 들고 그리고 몽유병이 있고 서랍을 열고 이런 행위들이 말을도 못했던 3살 이전의 행동이었다고 하고요. 이제 3살이 됐을 때 처음으로 말을 띄웠을 때는 처음으로 한 얘기가 본인이 전생에서 마당에서 아마 뭐 벼락을 맞아 죽은 게 아니었나라는 말을 했다고 합니다.
And after that, she began saying more and more things. She would say, she would use the name Jennifer repeatedly. She would talk about having, remembering the name. Well, she was asked at one point where she thought she had lived before. She said, well, maybe Canada. And then she quickly corrected herself and said, well, no, it sounds like maybe Louisiana. And other things. So those are the most significant, though, until she was 6. So she's now 6 years old, and this is going on, and it became more clear in her mind. And she told her mother at that stage that she thought that she had died when she thought that she had died when a plane had hit her, and she thought, and she wasn't sure of the year, but the year 1981 somehow seemed significant to her.
네. 그래서 이제 점점 어린 나이 때, 유아기 때 나이가 한 살 한 살 먹어가면서 좀 더 전생에 대한 기억이 뚜렷해지는 것처럼 보이는데요. 제니퍼라는 이름을 자주 언급을 했다고 하고요. 전생에 살았던 지역이 캐나다라는 국가였었는지 내지는 뭐 미국의 루이지애나 주였던지 뭐 본인도 헷갈려 했다고 합니다. 그 당시에까지만 하더라도 4살 5살 때까지는. 그리고 6살이 됐을 때는 이제 엄마한테 그렇게 얘기를 했다고 합니다. 전생에 비행기와 어떤 충돌 사건이 있어서 죽음을 겪은 것 같고 해당 시점이 1981년인 것 같다. 특정한 숫자를 특정 연도를 얘기를 했다고 합니다.
So these were the clues her mother needed then to go to the internet and do a search. And so she searched for plane crashes in 1981. And in Canada, first, nothing. She couldn't find anything. And then she searched in Louisiana, and she found something. There had been a Pan American Airlines plane crash in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1981, which had crashed just after takeoff into a residential neighborhood. And everyone on the plane had died. 6 people on the ground had died. It crashed into a house. It crashed into 15 houses were destroyed in this. But the first house it crashed in, there was a girl named Jennifer who lived there.
네. 그래서 어머님이 당시 이제 이 라일리안 소녀의 어머님께서 이제 1981년에 혹시 추락한 사건이 없는지 직접 본인이 알아보니 캐나다에는 그 사건이 없었고 그 뉴올린스시 루이지애나주의 뉴올린스시에는 팬암 항공사의 비행기 추락 사건이 1981년에 있었다는 사실을 알게 됐다고 하고요. 당시에 비행기가 이륙하자마자 인근 마을에 바로 추락을 해서 15개의 주택이 파손이 됐고 첫 번째 집이 이제 제니퍼라는 소녀가 살고 있었던 집이라고 합니다.
So all this was known before I learned about the case and before I began investigating it. And the way we investigate these cases is to go and interview people. So I went out to Oklahoma and talked to Rylan, who was then 10. And when you've got a 10-year-old, you know, it's much easier to talk with them. If it's a younger child, you have to talk with their parents. You try to interview them, but they don't remember much that they've said always. And sometimes they're shy. But with a 10-year-old, it was very nice. I could talk with her. I could interview her as well as her parents. And she told me something new. She told me at that point that it had become even clearer in her mind what had happened. And she said that she wasn't in her yard. She was in the carport of the house. and she was talking on the telephone. Now, this was 1981, so it would have been a telephone on one of these long lines from the house. We didn't have cell phones back in 1981. So you have to imagine that. And she's talking on the telephone, and she's seeing the plane comes toward her. And then she felt like she was electrocuted over the telephone line, and she died. The plane was coming towards her, but she was electrocuted when she was talking on the phone. So after interviewing her, then I went to New Orleans to interview her old friends there, and also I was able to obtain her death certificate, Jennifer's death certificate, and the death certificate showed that that Jennifer was found, her body was found on the floor of the carport, but totally burned, because when the plane hit the house, it set it on fire. You know, jet fuel is spilling out, everything. It was just a conflagration. And so her body was totally burned. But there was no sign when they did the autopsy, no sign of smoke inhalation in the lungs, no discoloration of the blood, which indicated that she had died before the plane hit her. Now, in front of the house, there was a telephone line and the power line, and the power lines were not insulated. So the plane would have had to cut through those. It did cut through them in coming towards the house. And so if the electrical line had hit the telephone line, which is quite plausible it would have, that is how she could have been electrocuted over the telephone line. At any rate, it turned out to be very plausible, although it seemed unlikely at first.
네. 이제 멜록 교수님께서 아까 방금 저에게 말씀드렸던 내용은 본인이 직접 인터뷰하기 전에 들었던 내용이고 해서 이제 이 소녀의 사례가 아주 흥미로워서 본인이 직접 오클라호마주에 날아가서 이 소녀를 만났고, 당시 이 소녀는 이제 10살이었다고 합니다. 그래서 라일린이라는 소녀가 10살이다 보니까 좀 대화를 좀 더 심도 있게 할 수 있었고, 좀 더 기억도 구체적으로 할 수 있었다고 합니다. 그래서 당시에 라일리라는 소녀가 멜록 교수님께 말하기를 내가 마당에서 죽은 줄 알았는데 다시 기억을 더듬어 보니 미국은 다 주택형 집이다 보니까 주택에 있는 주차장 입구 쪽에서 통화를 하고 있다가 감전사고로 죽은 것 같다라는 얘기를 이제 멜록 교수님께 했다고 하고요. 멜록 교수님께서는 이제 그 사실을 듣고 이제 뉴올린스주에 가시게 됩니다. 그러니까 뉴올린스주는 이제 라일리 소년의 전생이었던 제니퍼가 거주했던 지역이죠. 그래서 뉴올린스에 가서 제니퍼의 사망 신고서를 확인을 했고요. 사망 신고서를 봤더니 시신이 연소된 상태로 사망했다는 내용이 기술되어 있었다고 하고요. 당시 이제 부검을 해봤더니 비행기가 충격 전에 사망했다는 내용을 확인할 수 있었다고 합니다. 그래서 그 제니퍼 지역 집 근처 쪽을 확인해봤더니 비행기가 추락을 하면서 당시 앞에 있었던 그 전압선을 끊고 이 전압선이 제니퍼가 통화하던 전선이랑 맞닿으면서 감전 사고로 이제 즉사를 한 것으로 일단 부검 결과가 써져 있었고, 그렇게 이제 현생과 전생 내용이 일치가 되는 것을 멜록 교수님께서 직접 확인을 하셨다고 합니다.
So this is the kind of case we study. Typically, it's a young child like this who claims to have memories, and then we interview the family, the child, and then investigate the other side and see whether we can confirm the memories. And very often we can. Now, I want to say one other thing before I take the next question, and that is important fact about Ryland's case, and that is that while it was underway, and in fact, before her mother went to the internet and just as we say, solved the case by finding Jennifer. She was discussing this in email with different people. And so we have an email record, a written record of the case from before it was solved all the way through. And this is very important because at that point, you want skeptics of these, and there are plenty of skeptics, can't say, oh, the memories are just wrong, people are making this up, whatever. We have a written record of what she said earlier, and then I have the autopsy report as well. So I have written documentation on both sides, both before and after.
네, 그래서 멜록 교수께서 연구를 하실 때는 이렇게 뭐 어린 아이들의 환생 사건도 눈여겨보지만은 또 부모들하고도 같이 연계해서 인터뷰를 할 수 있는 사건들을 중점적으로 보았다고 말씀을 하시고요. 이제 당시 이제 라일리의 엄마가 직접 본인이 이제 검색을 해서 이제 제니퍼에 대한 내용을 알게 됐죠. 근데 그 전부터 엄마가 여기저기 이제 이메일을 보내고 확인했던 내용, 그리고 멜록 교수님께서 최초의 이 사건에서 연구를 했을 때부터 주고받았던 이메일을 이제 연대기식으로 쭉 수집을 하고 DB화했기 때문에 이걸 통해서 좀 더 이 사건의 이 사례에 대한 신빙성을 제고시킬 수 있었다고 말씀을 하시고 있습니다.
Okay, thank you, Jim. That was fascinating. Well, if you talk about reincarnation, then usually we talk about, for example, James Leininger's case, which is one of the most convincing cases. But I think this Jennifer Riley's case is really fascinating. I think the case should be publicized more widely. Can we move on to the next question, because we have limited time? Yes. Could you briefly explain your view of the Buddhist doctrine of reincarnation? You know, it is one of the central doctrines in Buddhism. And what do you think of karma, the possibility, the argument that the human souls can reincarnate into animal souls? Or the idea of non-self. What is your take on these aspects of Buddhist doctrine?
Well, I don't think I'm the right person to talk about Buddhist doctrine in general. It varies so much from one place to another, for one thing. But I can talk about how the cases relate to Buddhism. And so you asked about karma. When we look at cases like Ryland's, we don't see evidence of one of the deeds in one life leading to the next life. We don't see this. We only have a few cases, though, where we have a series of lives that have been solved, right? And so maybe we're missing something. But when we compare two lives, we don't see it.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So I was going to give Youngko a chance, and then I was going to go on to you. Also asked about animal lives, but I wanted to give Youngko a chance before I mentioned that. I wanted to give him a chance to translate, and then I'll go on to the animal.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Translation. Yeah.
네. 지 교수님께서 물어보셨던 다음 질문은 이제 불교의 핵심 교리 중 가장 대두되는 것이 이제 윤회 사상인데요. 불교의 윤회 사상에 대해서 이제 멜록 교수님께서 어느 수준까지 동의를 하는지에 대해서 여쭤봤고, 예를 들어 뭐 실체가 없다라는 이제 무아라는 개념, 또는 카르마, 동물로 환생하는 개념, 홀령, 이런 것들의 개념이 있는데, 이런 것에 대해서 멜록 교수님께 의견을 여쭤보셨습니다. 그래서 멜록 교수님께서 지금 뭐 간단히 답변을 주시기를, 본인이 뭐 불교 교리에 대해서 전문적으로 대답할 처지에 있지는 않지만은, 일단은 윤회 사상을 보려면은 환생이 한 번이 아닌 여러 번의 환생을, 시리즈 오브 환생을 놓고 얘기를 해야 되는데, 일단 방금 말씀드렸던 그 제니퍼 케이스 같은 경우는 이제 두 개의 삶에 대한 내용만 다뤘기 때문에 특별한 연결고리를 찾을 수는 없었다. 하지만 하고 이제 다음 얘기를 하려고 하시는 것 같습니다.
Yeah. Now, on animal lives, again, that's something that we don't see in the cases. Occasionally, there are claims to remember having been animals, but they're just claims. They don't have really anything much to them that we can investigate. And so we don't have any evidence of that. All the cases that we have, of course, are of humans. And my feeling is that animals, non-human animals, do reincarnate, but in their own species lines. That's my feeling. Now, there are other aspects of Buddhism, too, that the cases don't support very well. One would be the length of time between lives. Buddhism expects it to be at least 9 months because reincarnation occurs at conception, whereas when we look around the world, we see many cases where intermission is shorter than that. So, yes, so these are some of the main points at which the cases don't support Buddhist beliefs very well.
네, 일단 동물 환생에 대한 부분은 이제 멜락 교수님께서는 특별한 믿을 만한 근거를 찾지 못했다고 말씀을 주시고요. 다만 이제 다른 사례에서 봤을 때는 동물은 환생을 하는 것처럼 보이는데 동물은 동물로 환생하는 것처럼 보인다. 이 정도로 말씀을 주셨고, 이제 불교 교리랑 조금 차이점이 있었던 부분, 본인이 발견했던 부분 중에 하나가 이제 불교에서는 이제 환생, 전생과 그다음 환생이 이루어지기까지 죽음 이후에 그다음 환생이 이루어지기까지 9개월, 최소 9개월의 시간이 필요하다고 얘기를 하는데요. 왜냐하면 이제 임신 기간을 고려했을 때, 다만 이제 멜럭 교수님께서 본인이 연구하신 결과에 따르면은 9개월보다 더 짧은 기간에도 환생을 했던 사례가 있다라고 말씀을 하십니다.
Okay. We have a number of fascinating questions about reincarnation, and I think one of the most burning questions is, do children have any memories of what they are doing in between, after they died, a previous life, and before they were born? It's the argument that they were pre-planning the next life, that kind of thing, which has become a fad these days. Are the arguments evidence-based?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Quite a few children do say that they remember things. About 20% of the children of these cases say that they remember things that happened between their deaths and rebirths. And they will, now we don't have time really to go into this, but I would say that I did a study of these experiences and found that there is a real difference between Asian and Western experiences. In Asia, it's imagined that the afterlife, or the interlife, as I like to say, passes in a realistic terrestrial setting. And in the West, it's always in heaven. They go to heaven. And they interact with spirits. And the spirits, again, reflect the culture, right? So in the West, it's Jesus and angels, and in Asia it's either monks, very often in a Buddhist culture, or Yama in India, whatever. It's something appropriate, culturally appropriate. So the way that the spirits are interpreted is different depending on the culture. Now, you asked specifically about choosing the next life. Let me give Yanku a chance to translate so far, and then I'll address that.
네. 지 교수님께서 다음 물어보셨던 질문은 이제 죽음 이후에 환생 전까지 영혼들이 어떤 기억을 가지고 있는지 아이들한테 질문을 해봤던 적이 있었느냐라는 질문을 물어봤고요. 그리고 이제 최근 환생 연구 결과 또는 UAG 단체에 따르면은 환생 전의 영혼은 환생을 하게 되는 삶에 대해서 사전에 계획을 하고 또 직접 환생에서 태어날 삶을 선택한다라는 아이디어가 많이 제기되고 있는데, 이런 아이디어들이 어느 정도의 근거에 기반해서 얘기가 되고 있는지 이제 멜록 교수님께 여쭤봤습니다. 그리고 멜록 교수님께서 답변하시기를 아이들이 그런 기억이 있다고 얘기를 했다고 하고요. 다만 이제 좀 차이점이 있다고 합니다. 그 문화적으로. 그래서 서구권과 이제 아시아 지역과 그 경험의 차이가 좀 있는데, 이제 서구권 쪽의 그 경험자들은 통상 천국, 영혼 이런 개념을 이제 죽음 이후 사후 세계에 대해서 많이 설명을 하고 있고요. 아시아권에서 나온 사례자들의 얘기를 들어보면은 천국보다는 보다 현재 저희가 살고 있는 지구와 비슷한 현실적인 세계관의 그 사후 세계가 펼쳐진다라고 증언을 하고 있다고 합니다.
Okay, so the children often say that they remember choosing their parents. Not always. Sometimes there was another spirit that got involved and helped them in some way, or even occasionally led them to the new birth. However, they don't talk about having foreseen the new life beyond that. They don't. They say they chose their parents because they either somebody that they knew, or more often it was somebody that they liked, they saw from where they were, and they were attracted to them. They chose their parents at any rate, but they didn't decide on the parents on the basis of what kind of life they would have. They didn't foresee their life.
네.
That's just all.
그래서 그 환생에 새로 태어난 삶에 대해서 선택을 하고 어떻게 그려질지에 대해서 알고 있느냐라는 질문에서는 아이들의 이제 증언에 따르면은 부모를 선택을 하기도 안 하기도 하는데, 이제 선택을 했을 때는 내가 앞으로 이번에 태어난 삶이 어떻게 펼쳐질 거를 보고 선택하는 게 아니라 그 부모의 특성, 자질 이런 것들을 보고 이제 부모를 선택하는 것이라고 하고요. 이제 환생했을 때 어떤 삶이 펼쳐질지에 대해서는 이제 그 사후 세계에서도 모른다라고 증언을 했다고 합니다.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that fascinating question. Now, I think we have only one more question to ask in terms of time. I think this is a more practical question and could be also personal one. How has your research on reincarnation affected your perception of your own death and the existential anxiety of your own? Do you think that the stories of reincarnation can help to alleviate the fear of death from people?
Well, two questions there. One, the personal one, and then do I?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Personally, I don't know. I came to reincarnation before I really thought too much about death, and so I never really had a fear of death in my 20s. When I came to this, and so, but I would say that now, having studied this for so long, and being convinced by the work that I've done, that I don't fear death. In fact, I look forward to coming back. I mean, I see a lot of people say that they don't want to come back again. If reincarnation, even those who accept reincarnation say they don't want to come back. It's been such a horrible life for them. I guess they don't want another one. Whereas I look forward to it. I would like to be able to come back and continue what I'm doing now. I would like to be able to continue my work. So I guess I've had a relatively good life then. I guess that's what it means, and I want to continue it. Now, can it help us live better? Well, I think we can look to Asia to answer that. I mean, it's a question that maybe we ask in the West that has more meaning. In Asia, where you have more people who believe in reincarnation, does the belief really help them, you know, to live better lives, or to not to fear death? I don't know. I haven't seen studies from Asia about the fear of death, so I don't know how common it is there. Whether a belief in reincarnation then would translate into not fearing death so much, or whether the knowledge that each life is different, and if your present life is good, then you want to prolong that, you know, and you don't know necessarily what your next life is going to bring. But on the other hand, if you have belief in karma, you believe that what you're doing now is going to influence the next life, you know, there's this acceptance. And so I'm not sure how to answer that, you know, in a general sort of way. I think you're, you're muted.
Yeah, your microphone is muted. Yes.
Okay. 마지막 질문으로 지 교수님께서 물어보셨던 것은 이제 멜록 교수님께서 현재까지 수행한 환생에 대한 연구를 통해서 이제 죽음과 이제 존재론적인 좀 불안감에 대해서 보시는 시각이 최초랑은 좀 바뀐 것이 있는지, 그러니까 첫 번째 꼭지였고요. 두 번째 꼭지는 결국에는 이런 환생에 대해서 학습을 하고 이런 사례와 이야기들을 보는 것이 결국 죽음에 대한 두려움을 해소시킬 수 있을 것인지 라는 질문을 이제 두 번째 꼭지로 물어봤습니다. 그래서 첫 번째 꼭지에 대한 답변으로는 본인은 사실은 뭐 처음부터 죽음에 대한 두려움이 딱히 없었다고 얘기를 하고 있고요. 지금도 많은 이제 환생 연구가들이 다음 생에는 환생을 하고 싶지 않다라는 분들도 있는데, 본인은 계속 환생을 이어나가서 환생에 대한 연구도 계속 이어나가고 싶다라는 식으로 말씀을 주셨고, 두 번째로 아까 어떻게 보면 좀 더 중요한 질문일 수 있는데, 과연 환생에 대한 연구와 이제 학습 자체가 이제 죽음에 대한 두려움을 완화시킬 수 있을지에 대해서는 사실 이 부분은 멜록 교수님께서도 좀 답하기 어려운 질문이라고 하고요. 특히 이제 서구권에서는 그래도 환생에 대한 연구가 진행된 반면에 아시아권에서는 어떤 식으로 이제 이거를 치료 목적으로 쓰는지 또는 연구가 진행되어 왔는지 아시아권 지역에서는 그런 논리지가 없기 때문에 좀 답변이 어렵다라고 말씀을 주셨습니다.
Well, I think I hope there will be further exchange of ideas between the West and the East on the issue, and we'll have a better understanding of the incarnation phenomenon. Now, I think it's time to open the session to the floor. I have other questions, but I will see if there's any slot for me to add those questions after we hear the questions from the floor. I see the audience is quite a mixture of Korean and American, and I see some British faces here. Please don't hesitate asking questions, whether it is in English or in Korean. Translation will be provided. And please use if you look at the bottom of the screen, there will be, it says here, reactions. You can use the raise your hands for your question. It's up to you now.
Well, we have one thing in the chat we could start with, perhaps. Or there's a second one that's just come in.
Do we have a chat? Right, please go ahead. Yes. Which one is it?
Well, I was
시청자분들께서는
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
시청자분들께서는 편하게 채팅방으로 좀 질문을 주시면 될 것 같고요. 지금 채팅방 쪽에 질문이 하나 올라오긴 왔습니다, 교수님. 우리가 계속 환생을 하는 궁극적인 목적은 무엇인지.
Okay. Yeah, please go ahead for translation. Yeah.
So one of our audience just asked, what is the ultimate reason behind reincarnation? Why are we constantly reincarnating to this life? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, well, this is another important question, and it's one that, of course, we can only philosophize about, we can only theorize about, you know. Um, but it seems to me that I mean, the related question is, when did reincarnation begin, right? It seems to me that reincarnation began when life began. As soon as there was life, as soon as there was death of the body, there was the reincarnation of the consciousness that animated the body. You know, and this means that the reincarnation has been going on for a very, very long time, right? And in my view, consciousness has probably evolved just as physical form has evolved. And so, to me, its purpose is probably related to adaptation, the same way that that the physical form evolves, adapts to the circumstances and changes. So that I mentioned before, when we were talking about animals, that I thought all animals reincarnate. I think all animals do have different consciousness that's attuned to their bodies and that has evolved along with their bodies. And so I see the purpose as simply being to helping us adapt, and I like to use the term survive. You know, the consciousness does not it does not die, right? It's conservation of consciousness, conservation of energy. We talk about conservation of consciousness, and to me, that's really what it's about.
그래서 계속 환생하는 궁극적인 목적은 무엇인지에 대한 답변으로 멜럭 교수님께서 언제까지 이론으로 내세울 수밖에, 이론적인 얘기겠지만은 가설적인 얘기겠지만은 본인의 생각은 이제 환생이 시작된 것은 태초에 생명이라는 게 새로 시작됐을 때부터 환생이 시작됐기 때문에 환생은 굉장히 오랫동안 되어 왔다라고 생각을 하시고요. 그 궁극적인 목적은 본인 생각으로는 끊임없는 적응이라고 말씀하십니다. 어댑테이션이라고 말씀하시는데, 어떤 새로운 환경에서 끊임없이 적응을 하고 발전해 나가고 성장해 나가고 하는 것에 그 목적이 있지 않을까라고 말씀을 하셨는데, 지 교수님, 제가 혹시 놓친 게 있으면 좀 부연 설명 말씀드리겠습니다.
충분히 된 것 같아요. Yes. I see another interesting question here on the chatting box. But first, I would like to give chance to our audience on the screen first, and we'll come back to the chatting box. Louise, please go ahead here.
Hello there, Dr. Chi. I'm sorry I joined the meeting a bit late. Just listening to you, Jim, if I may, I agree with what you've been saying. I've been working with past life regressions since 2006 continuously, and I've never had anyone yet incarnate in the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with what you say. I believe that the animal kingdom is on a different vibration, a different dimension. It's no better or worse than a human or a more sentient entity's vibration. But I don't think we come back as a cat or a dog or a parrot or something. Although I do think in spirit we can choose to experience it, not as an incarnation, but to try on, for example, like a t-shirt or a suit, just to see how it would feel. So I think we can do that. I also agree with your point that incarnations or reincarnation isn't linear. It's not sequential. I think the soul, when we pass to spirit, the soul reviews the experiences we have had or not had, and the ones that it wants to be experienced but we didn't quite achieve, I'll use the words, it parks it somewhere, if you like, in an envelope or a box or something. When we choose to reincarnate again, if we choose to reincarnate again, if that's part of the soul's wish, it looks back and finds some of the experiences that may fit the new incarnation and will bring them forward and say, well, that will help with the incarnation to develop and grow. But I don't necessarily think that when we pass, we come back in like at chapter 2 or chapter 3. I think the soul chooses when to experience, and it's not necessarily sequential.
Okay, let me. I'll let you translate that first, and then they'll come in.
Yes, yeah.
네, 그 루이스 그린 분께서 질문을 주셨는데요. 일단 첫 번째로 멜럭 교수님과 동의하시는 부분을 먼저 말씀 주셨습니다. 동물의 이제 인간이 환생을 한다 하더라도 동물로 환생을 하지 않는 것은 이제 루이스님께서도 2000년도부터 이제 회귀 분석 이제 통해서 그 연구를 하셨는데 그 다양한 사례를 봤을 때 동물의 세계로는 환생하지 않는 것으로 보인다고 말씀 주셨고, 물론 이제 동물의 영혼으로 환생할 수 환생은 안 하지만은 이제 경험은 어떤 선생의 역할로 경험을 해볼 수 있다라고 얘기를 하고 있고요. 두 번째로 이제 질문 자체는 이제 환생이 순차적으로 일어나지 않는 것처럼 보인다. 그러니까 뭐 계속 성장을 해 나가는 데 있어서 뭐 이렇게 뭐 챕터 1, 챕터 2 이런 식으로 가는 게 아니라 영혼이 살아가다 보면은 과거로 돌아가기도 하고 특정 필요한 시점에 특정 성장이 필요한 부분에 대해서는 자기가 필요했던 시점으로 돌아가가지고 환생을 할 수도 있기 때문에 그런 순차적인 부분, 이런 환생의 순서에 대해서 멜럭 교수님께 한번 의견을 여쭤보는 것 같습니다.
Okay, yeah, I don't agree with all of that, actually. I'm sorry. Let me first make the point that that the kind of research I do doesn't involve hypnotic regression. It's, we look at the spontaneous cases. And the reason that the researchers like me don't use hypnosis is that when there have been studies that have looked at the memories that have come up under hypnosis versus the memories that have been spontaneous, and the memories that are spontaneous often do check out. The ones that are under regression tend to be much more problematical in various ways, and so we're sort of, we stay away from it because from a research point of view, although it can have therapeutic benefits, from a research point of view, we find it not very helpful. Now, one of the differences is, although in the hypnotic things, yes, many people do find, and come to the conclusion that time is not linear, that we move back and forth in time and all of this. When we look at the spontaneous cases, that's not what we see. We see very much a linear progression of life. And what we do very much see personalities and interests carrying over from one life to the next. So we see a development from one life to the next in a linear sort of way. And before I throw it back to Jinwoo, let me just make one final point about linear time. When we look at a cosmology, when we look at geology, when we look at evolution, everything is always linear. So I don't know why then reincarnation should be any different, because it's part of the natural. It's part of the natural world, and the natural world seems to progress in a sort of a linear way. Okay, I can go on, but we don't have time for me to go on, so I'll throw it back to Jinwoo.
Thank you. Food for thought. Thank you, Jin.
Yeah.
그래서 루이스님께서는 이제 최면 회귀 연구의 바탕에서 이제 환생은 순차적이 않다라는 말씀하셨는데, 멜럭 교수님께서는 좀 상반되는 의견을 가지고 계십니다. 그 체면 연구에 따르면은 당연히 이제 순차적이지 않고 과거로 돌아가는 경험도 지금은 하고 있지만은, 이제 자각하는 경험에 기반한 자각하는 기억에서 나오는 증언들은 하나같이 전부 다 순차적인 그 디벨롭먼트, 순차적인 경험을 설명하고 있다라고 이제 멜럭 교수님은 말씀을 하시고요. 그래서 본인은 이제 우주 근원적으로 봤을 때 모든 것이 순차적인데 환생이라는 개념이 순차적이지 않을 이유가 없지 않느냐라는 시각을 가지고 있습니다. 네.
Well, that's a fascinating point. Louis actually conducted very important sessions on me. I hope we'll have time in the future to talk about it. And I share a lot of points with Louis on the hypnotic regression, the value of hypnotic regression. And perhaps I may have a chance to play a devil's advocate in a similar session in the future. I believe there's something very valuable in hypnotic regression as a means of recovering the memories of previous life, but that's a different matter. Now, do we have other questions from the audience? Okay. If there's no question, then could we go to the chat box? It looks like there's a question about how to remember, how to see the previous lives. Jinwoo, do you have anything else to add for your translation?
I guess one of our audience is asking whether what are some of the methods that one could try to seek for when he or she wants to know about his or her past life. What is there any specific method that you recommend or?
Yes, this comes up quite often. And for there are people who would say, okay, regression, that's the answer. The problem with the regression, from my point of view as a researcher, is that yes, you get many people can be regressed, and they will remember, they'll say all sorts of things. But when you go and when you investigate them, like I investigated Ryland's case, what you find very often, most often, is that you can't validate the things. And sometimes the things that are said are wrong. There are examples of, the best regressions, there are some that are good. The best ones are when there's also spontaneous memories. But there are examples where there's a spontaneous dream, for instance, which is correct about how someone died, and under regression they remembered something very differently, which was wrong when they got hold of the death certificate and they found out what the fact was. We run into this again and again and again. So which is why, from my point of view, from a research point of view, we don't counsel regression to learn about past lives. So what is the best way to do it then? If someone already has memories naturally, there are techniques that can be used to help it. For instance, reading or watching things about the life one seems to recall, can help bring things up. Meaning it's a cueing sort of effect on the memory. Going back to places can have the same effect. But if you don't have any memories at all, we don't know of any reliable way, unfortunately, of bringing the memories up. One sort of has to wait on that. Now, I want to make a related point on this, but I'll let Jinwoo translate this so far.
네, 그래서 뭐 대표적으로는 이제 김인재님께서 물어보신 질문인데요. 좀 더 포괄적으로 좀 질문을 여쭤봤습니다. 그래서 뭐 전생을 알 수 있는 방법으로 대표적으로는 이제 최면을 해서 최면 회귀 방식이 있겠죠. 이제 멜록 교수님께서 말씀하시기를 이제 최면을 통해서 나오는 이런 증언들은 사실 검증하기가 상당히 어렵다라는 좀 취약점이 있고요. 그래서 이런 검증을 하지 못하는 부분에 대해서 이거를 이제 실제 자각하는 기억과 뭐 같이 중복이 되는 경우에만 좀 이제 조금 믿을 만한 근거를 볼 수 있고, 그래서 이제 좀 쉽지가 않은데, 뭐 그러면 방법이 어떻게 있냐? 그러면은 전생에 대한 기억이 조금이라도 있다고 하면은 전생에 조했을 소재에 대해서 뭐 읽거나, 또는 전생에 있었을 법한 장소에 가거나 해서 그런 전생에 대한 기억을 좀 더 살리는 방향도 있을 것 같고, 그거 말고는 현실적으로 다른 방법이 있을 것 같지는 않다라고 말씀하고 계십니다.
Okay, I'll just make the last point very briefly, and that is that I think what is going on here, and why you see the difference between the spontaneous memories and the induced ones under hypnosis, is because the memories are in our subconscious minds, as I see it, in our consciousness. And when we recall things spontaneously, the subconscious is ready to let them go. When we try to induce the memories, when we try to get around our subconscious blocks, then the subconscious puts up these distortions. And I think that is why we see under hypnosis and other techniques to try to recall things that that the memories are not as always as correct as they are spontaneous, and the ones that come up spontaneously.
네, 추가적으로 말씀을 드리면은 기억이라는 것 자체가 자각하는 기억이나 또 체면을 통해서 불러일으키는 기억이 이제 무의식 속에 잠재를 하고 있는데, 이제 체면을 통해서 불러일으키는 기억은 이런 무의식들이 왜곡을 시키는 경우가 빈번하다고 하고요. 하다 보니 이제 최면 회귀 연구에 대한 방식을 그렇게 추천을 하지 않는다고 말씀하십니다.
Thank you for the informative view of the methodological side of the research. Dr. Matlock and I agreed to have a second session in the future, and wherein we'll focus on more specific technical side of the research, including methodological issues. So I hope we'll be investigating many other aspects of this problem. Well, personally, I believe as a hypnotic regression researcher of alien abduction, I believe children's memory is also subject to confabulation as much as the regression hypnosis targeted at grown-ups. Because I don't see any hands raised, may I use this? Okay, can I ask one, I think, important question? I think many problems we have in this life obviously are rooted in the way we live in this life, but some of them maybe originated from our past life or past lives. Have you come across any cases wherein you saw this connection between present problem with the experience in the previous life?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. Actually, that's a very good question, and it's a very important one. Yes, we do see this, particularly when there has been a trauma. When a traumatic death or in the previous life, the children will exhibit, like Rylan, for instance, exhibit various symptoms of a post-traumatic stress. You know, for instance, she's sleepwalking, her wanting the tags cut out of her shirts. It felt like her skin was burning. I don't think I mentioned that, but that's what she said. Another case that I studied that was very interesting in this respect, another American case, was actually a dream case, not a waking case, but a dream of dying in an historical event, a major flood in Los Angeles, and it led to severe post-traumatic stress symptoms. But again, it's post-traumatic stress. And it all the symptomology of what we see in post-traumatic stress related to events in the present life, but it was events from the previous life that caused these problems. So yes, we definitely see these carryovers.
네, 지 교수님께서 이어서 주신 질문은 저희가 살아가다 보면은 현생에 겪고 있는 수많은 문제들이 있는데 또는 뭐 아픔이 있을 수도 있겠고요. 이게 전생으로부터 전이가 돼서 연결돼서 넘어올 수 있는 건지에 대해서 물어보셨고, 웰럭 교수님께서는 그런 경우가 충분히 있다고 합니다. 특히 이제 트라우마를 호소하고 있는 사례자들이 그런 경험이 많다고 하는데요. 아까 대표적으로 저희가 처음에 다뤘던 라일리 소녀의 사례 같은 경우에도 몽유병이 있었다고 했죠. 몽유병이 있고 당시에 이제 피부가 타들어가는 것 같다라는 표현도 많이 했다고 합니다. 그런 것들이 어떻게 보면 전생에 감전사고를 당해서 죽었던 그 트라우마가 현생까지 연결되는 케이스일 수 있다고 보고요. 그리고 멜러 교수님께서 다른 사례 중에서도 미국 사례도 하나 있는데요. 미국 LA에서 익사를 했던 분이 현생에서 그 익사로 인한 그 트라우마를 현생에서 호소하는 그런 분도 어, 어, 그런 사례도 있었다라는 것을 말씀 주셨습니다.
Okay, thank you. I was quite busy reading chat boxes. Looks like there are three related questions. If you allow me to translate it. It looks like in the first phase of the human evolution, there are only a few people. The question is, now we have a number of people living on the planet, and which means although we have many bodies, it looks like the souls are limited to a particular number. And related question is, how is that possible? And related to this is the question, will there be any souls that are not reincarnated? So those questions are talking about the imbalance between the number of souls and the number of available bodies.
Yeah.
What is your take on that?
Okay. Again, first thing I must say is that this is not a question that can be answered by the case data as we have it now. It's another one of these questions that's important, but we have to be clear that we're being speculative about it. We can only answer in a philosophical or perhaps a theoretical way. There are and various suggestions have been given of how to address this population issue. One of them is that perhaps after all, animals can reincarnate as humans. Perhaps it does happen that there's movement back and forth, or perhaps that some animals, are able to develop their consciousness sufficiently to reincarnate as humans. Another possibility, which I don't care for very much, is that we have aliens coming in from elsewhere, other planets. And then there's the possibility that seems sort of outlandish at first, but the more you think about it, is sort of where I am now. And that is that maybe consciousness can split, can divide. Or that there is a sort of a background consciousness from which consciousness streams can be drawn as required for new bodies. So, but all of these are possible. All these are theoretical ways of addressing that issue.
네, 그래서 USO님께서 말씀하신 질문들을 이제 좀 정리해서 여쭤보셨는데요. 이게 질문을 다시 좀 긴 질문인데 요약을 해보면은 이제 영혼들은 이제 신체의 수는 한정적인데 환생은 계속 한다고 하면은 이런 환생의 횟수와 신체의 개체 수에 대한 임밸런스에 대해서 어떻게 불균형함에 대해서 어떻게 보는 건지 그래서 물어봤고 어쨌거나 멜러 교수님께서 답변하시기를 일단 이런 질문들 같은 경우는 본인이 보셨던 2,500여 건의 사례는 있지만 이 사례를 바탕으로 이런 질문들을 답변하기는 어렵다고 하고요. 언제까지나 철학적으로나 가설적으로만 다가갈 수밖에 없다라고 말씀하셨고 여러 가지 가설을 말씀해 주셨습니다. 동물이 좀 더 영혼적으로 성숙이 돼서 인간의 영혼으로 환생할 수도 있겠고 또는 외계인이 또는 다차원적인 존재가 인간으로 환생을 해서 환생의 횟수를 늘릴 수도 있겠고 마지막 말씀 주신 부분이 좀 흥미로웠는데요. 영혼 자체가 여러 가지로 분리되는 하나의 영혼이 하나의 의식이 여러 개의 의식으로 또 분리가 돼서 환생이 이루어지는 것도 하나의 가설일 수 있겠다라고 말씀을 주셨습니다.
Okay, and if you look at the chat box, then we'll see another question. Actually, partly it was dealt with already. Present problems, for example, like a claustrophobia, could be linked to the experiences in the past life. So what is your opinion of that? I think.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry. I was distracted because I was reading Elaine Finkelstein's question. But did you have? And I want to answer I want to answer her point. Was that what you were referring to?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yes. I mean, I think that I think the regressions can help in therapy. They can help people dealing with fears and phobias. I make a distinction between a psychological reality and a factual reality. And I think that when it comes to the psychological reality, where it doesn't really matter so much about what the real truth is, right? It's just a psychological truth that the regressions can help with that, because it doesn't matter if you've got confabulations. It doesn't matter at all. It's a psychological truth. But as a researcher, which is what I am, then it does matter. We have to be reliable. And the only thing we can do with children's cases, with spontaneous cases, adults' cases, spontaneous ones, we have to investigate them. We don't take them at face value. We have to check them out too, you know. So, and that's not very often done with regressions. People just accept them. But when it is done, what we find is that the regressions are not nearly as reliable as the spontaneous, which is why people like me stay with the spontaneous. But from a therapy point of view, yes, regressions are very useful.
아까 일전에 물어봤던 질문과 조금 이어진 질문이긴 한데요. 지금 이제 엘레인 핑클스타인 분께서 물어보시기를 어떤 폐쇄공포증 이런 것들도 전생의 어떤 경험에서 넘어오는 거냐. 그래서 아까 사실 넘어오는 거다라고 말씀 주셨고, 덧붙여서 멜럭 교수님께서 말씀하시기를 본인의 연구 방식은 일단 검증을 제일 우선시를 한다고 말씀하십니다. 하다 보니 최면을 통한 회귀 방식 같은 경우는 이제 치료 목적이나 또 심리학적인 부분을 다루기에는 적절한 방식일 수는 있겠으나 본인이 자각하는 기억에만 자각하는 기억을 근거로 연구를 진행한 이유는 이런 검증 자체가 좀 가능하기 때문이다라고 설명을 하고 있습니다.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's time to conclude our talk. You may have many other questions, but please then keep them until we have a second session, which will be in a few months' time, I hope. Well, again, I want to say huge thanks to you all, and until we see again, I wish you good luck. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor Sachi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.